this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. There are many things that have happened to me throughout my life where I didn't think I had a shot at it. Thankfully, some really cool things came about as a result of those things coming to fruition that never saw it really happening for me. But, when you begin to think about the rules or laws of probability, there are certain things within the physical realm that you look at and you just say, I just don't know how that's physically plausible. I'm thinking right now about the Courtney Clenny case that's going on down in Florida, where she alleges that she took a knife and threw it and stuck it into the chest of her rather ample-sized boyfriend and led to his death almost immediately. Chances of that happening are, I guess, slim and none. But there's another case out of Florida, too, that has recently been adjudicated. And it involves a story of a young man and his mother. And his claim is that his mother slipped and fell upon a knife blade that wound up creating a fatal injury in her neck. Plausible, possibly, possible, unlikely. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I've seen a lot of bizarre things over the course of my career as a medical legal death investigator, Dave. Some things just defy explanation. Some of the more bizarre things, I'm thinking about right now. Wrong place, wrong time. I guess we could probably do an entire episode on some of these oddities because they do exist. You look at it and you think, wow, that could have been me, or, I can't tell you how many times I've been surrounded by cops that, they would start off a conversation with, what are the odds, while we're standing over a body, just over and over again, where, my old friend, Dr. Parker, who I've quoted before on this program, he used to refer to it as the Fickle Finger of Fate. But, most of the time, particularly when it comes to homicides, Dave, Fickle Finger of Fate doesn't necessarily apply. And in this case today, I think that this is one of these instances where I can say I've never actually worked a case where somebody kind of accidentally fell on a blade and it struck them in the neck. It just seems odd to me.
It seems like something a third grader would come up with. I was talking to you about this before we started. It's the only person who's going to believe this explanation is another child, that she accidentally fell on a knife and it must have been sticking up out of the floor. And I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to believe this because that's all I got. But the reality here is Collin Griffith is a teenage boy who has been accused of killing his mother and, by the way, his father. Not at the same time, actually separated by a year and a half, and two different modes of murder. One used a knife, the other a gun. Now, Joe, you've pointed out to me that oftentimes a killer or alleged killer has they have a certain thing they like to use when they're killing. A knife person or a gun person or a strangle person, whatever it happens to be. But in this case, we're dealing with a son who, for whatever reason, has both of his parents die in very violent ways. And the only person who has been accused is their son. He was 15 at one of the deaths and 17 at the other. And we don't have to say alleged death because they are both dead, both of his parents. And he was the only person who was involved, or there is nobody else alleged to have been involved in either of the deaths. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Dave. And can I add one more element to this?
Everything you want, because this is already so jacked up. I'm going to have to take notes again.
Well, now we've got also a geographic oddity here, because these two deaths, if you will, occurred, I guess we could say right at about 1,000 miles apart, or maybe in excess of that, I guess, wherever you're talking about, right. Geographically. One of the deaths, of course, is in Oklahoma, and then the other one is in Florida, which, it just adds another level of oddness, I guess, you will. And it's not like we're talking about somebody that's hitchhiking with truckers and traveling all about the country, with, and hell followed in his wake. It's not like that. It's, we're talking about a kid who, with the initial death, was 15, and now, 17. It's super, super odd as far as I'm concerned. I don't recall ever having been involved in a case, like this, certainly as an investigator.
Let's do this, Joe, because you and I both were struck by the idea that somebody would actually claim that the stabbing of his mother, Collin Griffith's mom, died of a knife to the neck. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And his explanation was that she fell and landed on it that way. That was what he actually said to police. And he stayed with that from beginning to end, did he not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. And that was what he had alleged had happened.
Now, you mentioned Courtney Clenny in the opening.
Yeah.
I tell you, friends, if you haven't listened to that show, go do it, because I learned so much in that. There were so many things I can't even explain to you, because it was so the way you explained that wounding that led to his death is amazing to me. But that one, at least on the surface, made, some kind of sense. I mean, to the layperson, it was like, okay, that could happen. But this one, I'm looking at it going, not even in a cartoon. This is not how things happen.
Yeah. Again, it's a matter of what are the odds. Now, listen, I'm not saying that everybody is pure as the driven snow here. Okay. Let's dispel that, from Jump Street. You've got a 15-year-old kid initially that's obviously in a very troubled set of circumstances. Any kid's going to be troubled that doesn't necessarily have this kind of nuclear family, where you've got the mom and the dad that are together, and not just that, you've got the separation of this geographic separation that's so vast. Can you imagine being a 15-year-old kid and thinking, well, my mom is all the way down in Florida. I'm up here in Oklahoma. How am I ever going to get to see her again? And then you've got all of the logistics of planning a trip to get together with her, or, get back to your dad, or, so it's a sad position for any child. And when this all started, he, Collin was in fact a child, in the purest sense, defining situation, by law. He's at a great distance. So he's already at this tremendous disadvantage, I think. And you never know, if you're cooking up this kind of, relationship stew, familial relationship stew, those ingredients can make for a real violent and maybe kind of twisted situation in any child's life who's developmentally, the brain is still developing, so a lot at play here. And on both sides of this, can you imagine the can you imagine the difficulty the prosecution had in both of these cases to try to walk that line when you're talking about somebody of such a young age that's been involved in this really bizarre set of living circumstances?
When you and I were growing up, we were considered adults because of the movement that happened in the late 60s, early 70s. You and I, when we were in our high school years, we were treated as young adults. And at 18, you were considered an adult, and you were treated as an adult. Now it's like in the last 20 years, we've kind of come off of that. And now we're treating young adults like children until they're 25 because their brain is still developing or what have you. But anyway, let's just deal with Polk County, Florida for just a minute, because one of our favorite sheriffs is Grady Judd. I say our favorites from the standpoint of reporting on crime. Grady Judd is very public. He does not mind holding a press conference, and he does not mind saying what he thinks, which from our angle, it helps because we get a lot more information than normal from him.
Yeah, and again with he's a politician, okay, and you have to measure it with that. For everybody that wants to make a star out of a politician, they have motives of their own. When they sit in front of a bank of microphones. Let's dispel this idea that they're pure as the driven snow. There's that term again.
Got to get the votes.
But you got to get the votes. And so you take that with a grain of salt, but you're right with Grady Judd in particular. I don't know of any sheriff in America really in today's context that gets the national attention that he does. He's obviously got an apparatus behind him that enables him to do this.
Joe Arpaio out of Maricopa County, Arizona, used to be, America's sheriff kind of thing. Yeah. Then we had Clark up in Wisconsin, and now Grady Judd in Florida. But I went ahead and I pulled an article. This is from the first articles reporting the arrest in Florida. Here's what it says. According to the Polk County Sheriff's Office, a 17-year-old was arrested for killing his mother on Sunday evening. Sheriff Grady Judd says Collin Griffith of Port Charlotte was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and violation of a no-contact order. Witnesses told detectives that they saw Collin Griffith and his mother outside the mobile home arguing, and that they saw him, Collin Griffith, grab his mother by the hair and drag her inside the house. Investigators said witnesses told them that Catherine Griffith repeatedly pleaded with her son to, quote, "let me go." According to the sheriff's office, when deputies asked Collin Griffith what happened at the scene, he became immediately uncooperative and asked to speak to a lawyer. Detectives said as the investigation continues, they noticed inconsistencies between what the teen said in his 911 call and what was discovered at the scene. That's from the first articles reporting the arrest of 17-year-old Collin Griffith and the death of his mother.
Yeah, you rely heavily upon what eyewitnesses tell you. Sometimes there are none, obviously, but when you do have them, they're invaluable to an investigation. And so to take this article, these comments in this article on its face, you've got something that is obviously violent that kind of kicks this whole thing off. The status of the witnesses to this, was it loud enough so that they could have heard it from within their own home surrounding this particular location, or were they out in the yard watering the grass and they'd look up and here's this young man who has his mother by the hair of the head and he's dragging her back toward the house, which, by the way, she winds up being drugged back into the house and is never seen in the world of the living again, because it was following this that a 911 call is made, and when police roll up, the scene is bathed in her blood. The thing about law enforcement and investigators is that you can see something and take it on its face, right? You see it at the scene and you say, okay, well, I've got this woman who has obviously sustained a horrible injury to her neck, throat, depending upon, what you choose as your descriptor here. Super saturated in blood. And you find a weapon there, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I would love to have been a fly on the wall when the investigators found out that this young man, who apparently has linkage to the death of his mother one way or another, because he's saying that, she fell on the knife as a result of an argument that they were having. And of course, the police are thinking that, he takes this knife and inserts it into her neck. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, when they discovered that, oh yeah, about a year ago, this kid who is now standing over the body of his dead mother, he shot his father in another state when he was 15.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being that detective when you first get that information? And it's weird, Dave, sometimes you'll go out on these cases like this and you look at the forensic evidence and what you're kind of surrounded by, and you have no explanation sometimes for it. Sometimes you do. In this case, you're looking at a stab wound. But you don't really go any further than that at that moment in time. And then suddenly, maybe while you're at the scene, this extra data comes rolling in and the complexion of everything at the scene suddenly changes. I mean, just consider it just for a second, if you will. You're thinking, oh, this kid's 17 years old and he's already been present during the midst of another homicide. And he was charged with it. It's super, super odd. You have to admit.
Well, okay. When they're covering the crime, and we started with the mother because that was the most recent, and you mentioned they find out who they're actually dealing with. I mean, what do we know? Because he lawyers up right away. From very first conversations, I want a lawyer. And for a 17-year-old to say that, either they watch a lot of crime stuff on TV, there are a number of different things that come to my mind, but all I'm thinking is this is somebody who has been around the legal system from a criminal perspective to know that they've already said too much because he made the 911 call. And when the authorities arrive on the scene, they're using the information given to them by 911 to set the stage, to set the scene. And when they walk in there, they're like, this does not match up with what he was saying on the phone to 911. Now, according to Pike County Sheriff's Office, that he, on his 911 call, said that he and his mother got into an argument. What is it, Polk County?
You said Pike.
Yeah. Oh, Pike. Okay, Polk County. Sorry.
Yeah, that's
but
okay.
The Polk County Sheriff's Office is saying, hey, man, he said he and his mother were having a fight and that she lunged at him with a knife and fell, and the knife went into her neck.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of all the ways of what we already know from witnesses of him dragging her by the head of the hair back into the trailer and her saying, let me go, which means she cannot get free herself. At what point did she get free to grab a knife and attack him in the way that he describes? They also talk about life-saving measures that he was given instructions over the phone that when they got there, they realized, he probably didn't do that. They're basing what they see and what they've been told, and they're not matching up. So he shuts it all down right away with his mother, and that's it. Now, detectives can only go on the physical evidence that they see, the story that he's told via 911, and that's it. There is nothing else, which defense attorneys love that. They would have much rather him not even made the 911 call because that's the story he's got to defend. That's why police want to get that initial statement. So as they're investigating and they find out, wait a minute, this now 17-year-old boy who is now charged with the first-degree murder of his mother a year and a half ago in February on Valentine's Day, of 2023. He is accused of killing his father in Oklahoma. But that one was with a gun. He shot him, and he claims self-defense, which I'm guessing if your mother just died while lunging at you with a knife and she fell on it and hit her in the throat, that also, he was doing nothing. It was self-defense. He was backing away. She tripped and fell on the knife.
Yeah. Retreat.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking the same thing, if you're looking for commonality here in the dynamics of both of these crime scenes, that's what's being stated with the murder of his father, which he says that he actually did, in fact, shoot his father. And I think that that's very important for us to understand, that he had retreated to a position where he felt like he was cornered. But David wasn't, in that particular case, it wasn't sufficient for him to have merely shot his father, once. He pops his father in the chest. Okay. Shoots his father in the chest. Now, his father's Charles Griffith, had shot him in the chest on, Valentine's Day, February 14, 2023. And then he gets popped in the head one more time. Almost, it's the coup de grace, if you will.
I just thought wrong. So you can actually determine what shots came first and last when they're that close behind one another?
Well, if you're talking about, okay, I'll put it to you in the most likely scenario. If you shoot somebody in the chest, there's a higher probability that they'll survive to the point where you're going to be able to shoot them in the head. And so if the headshot follows the chest shot and it's in quick succession like that, you're going to have hemorrhage in both of the wound tracks. However, if you score a headshot with the first discharge of the weapon, there's less of a likelihood that there would be, depending upon anatomically the position of that headshot, there'd be less of a likelihood that you would see trauma or hemorrhage in the wound tract of the chest, okay? Because, most of the time headshots are going to be fatal. And again, a lot of that has to do with positioning of the round. But he's only 15, and I'm wondering, because, it's generally, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. You've heard that in movies over the years, and that's kind of the finishing kind of touch. And that's something that is trained in the military, and in other organizations. So why do you go to the chest first? Well, you go to the chest first because it's a bigger target. Okay. So you're looking at the idea is to fire center mass, which means right in the heart of things. Okay. Literally and figuratively. So if you score a chest shot, there's a chance that, first off, if someone is coming after you and they have you cornered, they're going to go down. And then you stand over them potentially and finish them off with a headshot. Now, I mean, there are people out there that are really good with a weapon and they can do it in quick succession, but I've worked cases over the years where people have taken multiple gunshot wounds to the torso, and then somebody will have a finishing shot where they'll come to the head, because most people understand that headshots are in fact fatal. And that's how that would be determined. So if you're dealing with a headshot, you have, that's tracking with hemorrhage through it. There's a high likelihood that you won't have any hemorrhage in a chest wound. However, reversing that, thinking, well, he's shot in the chest first, he's probably still got some kind of agonal respiration, heart might still be beating, and there's blood coursing through the brain, and you shoot him again, then you can potentially have hemorrhage in that wound tract. Either way, the police, I think, Dave, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is it true in saying that he shot his father, and they charged him in Oklahoma, and it was within a month that they dropped those charges, correct?
Right. They did. And I looked at this because he was charged, with first-degree murder in that case. And at 15 years old, shot his father, and the judge ended up having all the charges dropped. I say the judge because I guess that's what happens. I mean, prosecutors can drop charges too, I guess. I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. We just play this on the radio. But
you're correct. Yep.
So the judge actually kicked that one to the curb. But he did not do it in a way where they can't bring the charges again later. They didn't do it with, what do you call it, with prejudice. You dismissed, dropped with prejudice means it cannot be brought again. Dropped it, but if they just drop it, just saying, hey, we don't have enough here. And I think, just my mind's eye, I'm thinking, when you start charging a 15-year-old with murder of his father and he claims self-defense, you really have to look at a lot of different things. You've got to consider the relationship and what you may or may not know about it, because he did have at the time a mother in Florida that was an option for him to go live with. And he was with his dad in Oklahoma. So the judge looks at the case and he drops it. Now, a year and a half later, we're in Florida where he now takes out his mother. I don't know if we ever have any kind of situation like this, Joe, having ever happened. I know we've had children accused of killing parents, but it's usually at the same time or the same general time where they take out one parent and then the other. But we're talking about 18 months, a year and a half in different states, as you mentioned at the very beginning. This is really different in terms of how do you defend this? If I kill two people separated by 18 months and I say it's self-defense, what kind of life am I living? What am I doing to put myself in this situation where the people that I'm around want to take me out and my only recourse to defend myself is to kill them? What am I doing wrong in life? That's what I'm thinking. But
I know. I gotta. I'm going to be very curious to see what the authorities in Oklahoma do with this if they go back to pick this case up again, and because what could have changed between these many months that have elapsed. What is it? It's less than 2 years.
18 months. February of 2023 to September 2024.
Yeah, and how much information could be integrated into a trial? Now, remember, he hasn't had a trial in Oklahoma. What information from the trial down in Florida, and is it possible to integrate that in? Because he's going to be charged if he's 15 years old. My understanding is that they could in fact charge him and treat him as an adult up there because of the nature of this crime. I don't know that it would go into a juvenile status, but I know that one of the things that may or may not be mentioned is what the medical examiner said down in Florida relative to Collin's mother's murder. What the medical examiner said was that, in their opinion, there's no way that she slipped and fell on a knife, bringing an end to her own life. You hear people make comments in literature and movies and things like that all the time about saying, young man, the world is your oyster. Go forth. Your future looks bright. What in the world do you say to someone like Collin Griffith? The worst of it is behind me now, and now I get to move on to a brighter future. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm genuinely asking, how do you move on from something like this where, now you're absent both of your parents. I understand, Collin's got a grandmother, but how do you move forward in these circumstances and live your life? It begs that question. And here's another thing, Dave, I got to throw at you. Who would feel safe, entering into any kind of circumstance with him?
Taking these one at a time.
Yeah.
They already got him to trial. Now, he's alleged to have killed his mother September 8th, 2024. And they got it to trial already. We're talking,
I was amazed by that. Yeah.
I mean, that's speedy justice, man. I'm thinking about how often a crime will occur and then we have a trial a couple of years later. This one is months, not even a full year. And I think because of that, it gives us a little bit better idea of what we're really looking at, because there's not a lot of distance here. We can actually count the number of months here. And September 8th, Collin Griffith is accused of killing his mother, and his defense is that she was charging me with a knife and she fell on the knife and hit her in the throat. He then lawyered up right away before talking to police, and boom, there you go. They got it to court. And this is the part that begins this whole thing. Most of us are amazed that a young man could be accused of killing both of his parents, separated by 18 months in different states. But here we've already got a case that's gone to trial, and the jury, I don't know how much they got to hear about the Oklahoma case.
Investigator that worked the case up in Oklahoma actually came down to Florida and testified in this homicide trial down in Florida. So yeah, I mean, even with that knowledge, that's been, kind of integrated into this. And my from a forensics perspective, I'd like to know how much forensics actually played into this case. I think I mentioned it to you. I saw the knife that was utilized, and this knife is for those that have not seen it, I encourage you guys to go take a look at it online. This knife is a smooth surfaced stainless steel knife. It's got the integrated stainless steel blade and you guys are going to know what I'm talking about. It's also got stainless steel handle on it too. So it's a smooth, non-porous surface that would easily bear any kind of prints that might be available on this thing. How was the knife processed? I think is going to be one of the big questions here. And it's a single injury, and there is quite a bit of blood on the surface of both the blade and the handle itself. One of the problems that you encounter, because I know that this is a big question many times with instruments that are utilized in a homicide, you want to be able to put it into the hand of the perpetrator if you have the weapon, right? And so with blood, though, if you're talking about a transfer of a fingerprint, which we know is generated by the fatty lipids in our fingertips, can it be obscured by the blood? Okay. Well, if she's bleeding out, also one of the things that you're thinking about, well, if he left the knife in her long enough, which obviously it was in her at some point in time and came out because her blood is on the surface of the knife, did he leave behind a bloody print in his mother's own blood, assuming he doesn't have any injuries, that transferred onto the surface of the blade that they could have processed and put that there? Of course, the defense can easily say, well, you don't understand, he picked up the blade. He picked it up because he He either wanted it away from his mother, he wanted it out of arm's reach of her, or he was trying to render aid, which of course, they're saying that he didn't make, he apparently made little or no attempt to try to save his own mother's life. But again, that bit of physical evidence there, is critical, Dave.
I'm glad you pointed all that out, because those are the things that a lot of us don't know, Joe. I mean, we don't. So it's amazing to me how many times I'll see something happen during a trial that I think are really important and end up being nothing. It happens all the time. In this case, we know that that Collin Griffith was acquitted. The jury said he didn't do it on purpose, or he was not guilty of murder. And so here we are. In less than 2 years' time, killed his dad in Valentine's Day 2023. And before Valentine's Day 2024, he's acquitted of the murder of his mother. 2 dead parents in a 24-month period of time. One charge is dropped. The other is he's acquitted. And I guess we're thinking about this as reasonable human beings, and whether or not you can believe that. And based on, they streamed the closing arguments on Court TV, I think, for this case. And in that, it was one of those things where the prosecution, or the defense said the prosecution has no proof of what happened inside the home the day Catherine was killed. That they were able to paint this picture, Joe, that she was unbalanced, that she had pointed a gun at Colin's face before. And I'm thinking, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument that had happened in the past. Let's just say for the sake of argument that he begged for foster care. Please send me to foster care to get me away from this crazy woman. Well, when it comes right down to it, he said she was lunging at him with a knife and it landed in her neck when she fell. And the medical examiner says that couldn't have happened. Now, when you testify, Joe, that this couldn't have happened the way he's describing it, to me, he's lying. And if he's lying about what happened, I can't believe anything else he's claiming, including self-defense. Obviously, I'm wrong, but doesn't it make sense to you?
Yeah. On one level, it does. I'm fascinated by something else that came up at trial, though, Dave. Did you know that the defense? How many times? Let me ask you something. How many times have you heard the term suicide by cop?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, bunch. And I know what they did at trial.
Yeah, and they're alleging that this is suicide by son. That's what defense is actually saying, because
it was affluenza boy. Remember that one?
Oh yeah,
it's similar. I mean, it's like you come up with a crazy defense. How do y'all just sit around and drink and smoke cigarettes and come up with, hey, I bet this will work. Suicide by son.
Yeah, I know. And it's a, highly implausible. But again, with the prosecution, forgive me, but with the defense, it's a matter of reasonable doubt. All it takes is one. The difference, though, is that, with suicide by cop is that you have to have a firearm involved, right? And it's allegedly a sure thing, that if you act provocatively toward a police officer, presenting a weapon, that they're going to draw, they're going to tell you to stand down, you refuse, you continue to advance or do whatever you're doing that's being aggressive in order to, get them to initiate fire upon you and end your life. Griffith alleges that there had been a long fight that had preceded this fatal injury that she had sustained, that the mother had sustained to the neck. And you're seeing that this is kind of an exhaustive event, where they're both tired. They'd been fighting. We do have an eyewitness that saw him dragging her, according to the witness, back into the house by the head of by the hair of the head. And then a fight ensues after that. This knife looks like something you would have gotten out of a knife block in a kitchen, that comes in a set. that's just sitting up there on the counter. Somehow that knife was accessed during this. Now, who put their hands on that knife first, I really don't know. But after this very long fight, suddenly she formulates in her mind that she's wanting, of all things, to commit suicide at the hand of her own son, and that she engineers this with a knife as opposed to a weapon. Now, a knife is very nonspecific. Okay. There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee with any weapon out there, but with a knife, you have to hit just in the right spot. So what's it going to be, defense? Is it that it was a long fight, that they're exhausted, and that suddenly she formulates this idea of suicidal ideation and decides to use her son as a means to that end? Or is it something else? The fact that maybe, just maybe, he decided to end the life of his mother because he didn't want to be there. We don't know. We know that he has been found not guilty. But there's one other thing that we know. Collin Griffith is now without either parent. One, dead in Oklahoma, admittedly at his hand by gunfire, and his mother, who wound up with a large sharp force injury to the neck. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.